Now, before we get started with our first project, let's make sure that we make some very important first settings in our Power BI project file. This is important so that what you see in your Power BI file matches what I am doing in the video, so that everything works in the same way for you as it does for me. So to do this, we will start by creating our project file. This we can do by just going to File and then we select New. And now in this new file, we will do our work in. But now in this file, we want to make those settings so we can save it and use this file later on. So I'm just closing this first window. And now to make these changes in the settings, we can go to File and afterwards to Options and Settings. And in here, we again go to Options. And now we will see two different sections. The first one is a global. This will be for all of the Power BI files we are creating. And then current file, these are the settings for just this individual file. So first under global, we want to go to data load. And here we want to change the type detection to never detect column types and headers for unstructured data. This is important because like this, we can do it manually and we really understand how it works. So let's change it to never detect column types so that it works for you in the same way also as it does for me. Secondly, we can also go to the regional settings. In here, just make sure you have also application language selected English United States and the model language also English United States. This is, for example, important for some internal date fields. So just set it to English United States and you will be fine. Also for the DAX separators, here you can also just leave it at the default recommended settings. And now under preview features, also just make sure you have on-object interaction activated in case you are seeing this. If you don't see this, it is already a public feature and you will be fine like this. And now we go to the current file. In here under data load, you only need to change this relationship section. In here, we want to uncheck all of the boxes. Like this, no relationships will be imported from the data source, and also there won't be any auto detect for creating some relationships. So we can again do this manually ourselves, so we really learn how this works. And actually, I recommend that this is in general a good setting, because with this auto detect method, sometimes there can be some mistakes. So now that we have those settings, we can also lastly go to the regional settings for the current file. This is actually super important because this determines how, for example, numbers or dates or time formats will be interpreted from text. So for example, Germany uses another date format than some other countries. And therefore, here it is very important to set the locale to, again, English United States. So I'm finding here English United States. I'm selecting it and now we can click on OK. And this now requires also a restart. So we can just go to File and then we go to just save this and then we can reopen this again. So I will go to Save As. And now I can just use, for example, initial project file. So I just type in initial project, I save it, and I can apply those steps if we want. This is fine. And now let's just make sure that we also close this file. And now we navigate to the location where we have saved it, and we can quickly reopen this file. And now we see this file has been opened up, and now we are ready to start with our first project. So therefore, in the next lecture, we want to introduce this project. We want to have a look at our data that we are working with, and we want to make sure that we get this data loaded into our file. Let's first have a look at how we can connect data with Power BI. Of course, the first and very important step. You can also, of course, download this data in the resources of this course. And we will start with this first file that we need to load. This is Sales 2017 raw. And let's quickly open this to have a look at this data. And here we can see this is our very messy sales data. That will be our first data that we are going to load. And in here we have a lot of work to do. We need to restructure it. We need to clean the data. But let's first get an overview over this data. First, we can see there's this order ID. This means that one row is just one order. So we have all of these orders. And in the second column, we see there's also the product ID. This means that later on, we can also connect it with a product table, and we can get additional information about the products just by building later on a relationship by using this product ID column. So you see those columns match, and like this, we can create a relationship. The same we can also do for the store ID. And then we have just some information here about the order date, and you see it's sometimes in a different date format. And then also about the revenue and the price. And I also want to mention, don't take the numbers here always too exact, because sometimes this is just sample data and the numbers don't need to be taken so exact in here. But overall, this is a very realistic project. So this will make a very realistic report. And then we have also information about the promotions. So we can analyze the different types of promotions. And then after the order date, there's also the delivery date. So this is our data. And now we want to, of course, get this into Power BI. So let me just close it and make sure we are not saving this. So we are not manipulating the data. And now we want to go back to our Power BI file. So how can we get the data? We can do this when we are in the home ribbon, and there we find this point get data. We can click on the upper part, and then this will just open up all of the different data sources. This is structured into those categories, and under file we also find CSV. Of course, we can always also use the search box, so I could also use just CSV and I find it directly. But something that is even a little bit easier is, instead of opening up all of the possible connectors that we have available, we can use this shortcut. And we also have a look at other data sources later on, of course, as well. But when I click not on the icon, but on this lower text, I also find the most commonly used data sources. So of course, in here, there is also text CSV. So when we want to load a CSV file, we just select this data source. And now in our case, we just need to navigate to the location where this file is saved on our local machine. I'm going to select it, and then I just click on open, and then we get a preview of the data. And in here we see this preview of the data. Now we could load this data directly into the model, or we could go to transform data. This will now open up the so-called query editor, and in here we could make some changes. In our case, we now, of course, want to start with making those changes to just clean the data, and we want to get started by learning about this so-called Power Query Editor now in more detail in the next lecture. Let's now have a look at our first initial course project. In this course project, we go through everything that is needed in Power BI from start to finish. So this will be a realistic project in which you will play the role of a data analyst that works in an e-commerce company, and you have to create a sales report, so a full comprehensive sales report from start to finish. So therefore, we are going to start with a raw data file. So this will be the sales data from this e-commerce store. And in here, everything is super messy, which is very good for us, because like this, we can practice all of the necessary tools for data transformation. And then, of course, the goal is that we create a comprehensive report. So we visualize all of the important metrics, including the sales categories, promotions, development of the sales over time, and so on and so forth. So this is only a sample report, but we will, of course, create our own report. And to be able to visualize all of those different metrics and create our comprehensive report, we will bring multiple data sources together. And then we will also, of course, have to create our data model. This means we create and we connect. This means we create relationships and we connect those tables, so we have our full comprehensive report. This is basically everything that is needed in every realistic project also. We will always have those three very important steps. First, of course, we bring the data into Power BI and then we need to transform the data. This is step one. Afterwards, we have to connect the tables by creating our data model. And afterwards, we can then visualize our data to create our report, and we can then also publish this into the cloud. So this is also what we are going to do. And now that you have this overview, we will start by getting the data now connected to Power BI. That's what we are doing in the next lecture. Let's now have a closer look at data transformation, which is something that we are doing in the Power Query editor. This is the window that we are currently seeing. So that's basically a tool within Power BI that is just there for transforming, cleaning, and restructuring our data. So let's have a look at these first steps in the Power Query editor. Let's first make it into full screen. And now, how does this tool work? First, we see that in the top of the screen, there are a lot of different tools. For example, keep rows, remove rows, change the data type, and so on. And these are now the most commonly used tools because we are currently in the ribbon Home. So here's just a collection of the most frequently used tools. But then we also have some other ribbons like Transform, Add Columns, and so on. And we'll have a look at those later on. For now, let's just go to Home and we have a look now at the data, because in the center of the screen, we see our preview, so how the data looks at the current state of transformations. So at the moment, we see the data is not really nice. We have, for example, these first two rows, and there's not really data that we need to visualize. So that's not part of the real data. Therefore, we want to first remove the top two rows. So to do this, we can just go to this tool where it says remove rows. And here we have also the option then to remove the top rows. So when I click on this, I can just now specify the number of rows that should be removed. So for example, I enter the number 2, I click on OK, and then I see now in the preview that those 2 rows have been removed. And now something else is happening. We see now at the right side these applied steps, and that's very important, because now we see that at this moment we have removed the top rows. So this is the preview that we currently see. But we can also go one step back, and then we see the data, so the preview, how it looks at this state where we have not applied any steps. So where we are currently selected with the source. And then if I jump back to removed top rows, I see again, this is how the data looks at this step. This is very important so that we can understand which steps we have applied, how the data got affected by this. And this is also important because we don't have something like undo the last step. So we need to undo this just in these applied steps. This means if we want to remove this step, we just need to delete it. We can do this by just clicking on this little icon where we have this X, and then this step has been completely removed from our list of applied steps. And then if I want to redo it again, I just need to reconfigure this step. For example, I can again go to remove rows, and then I say again remove top rows. And now let's say I use a wrong number. I made some mistake. So for example, I use the value 3, and then I see I've also removed the header, which shouldn't be the case, so which I shouldn't have done, and therefore I need to modify this step. And this is also possible. We can see with this gear icon that many of those steps we can reconfigure and modify. So for example, if I go to remove top rows, I click on this gear icon, I can now change the number of rows. So I can reconfigure this step. And now if I enter the number 2, I can see that this is now available again. But now if we have a closer look at this step, this first row, we can see that these are actually the headers. So this is not real data, but these are the headers. And luckily, we have one step that is removing this first row and just puts it into the header. So these are then the column names. And this is the step under the home ribbon, which is called use first row as a header. And then I see when I click on it that this is now removed from the data and it went right into the column names. And we can also see again that this step has been applied. So these were now our first baby steps in the query editor. And of course, we learn a lot more about all of these tools and working in the query editor. But now let's first have a look at how we can now, when we have done our steps in here, close this query editor and make sure that those transformations are applied. We can do this by just going to this little icon where it says close and apply. So when I click on it, I see that the data will be now transformed and loaded into our model. So we see this little loading window, and then the data will appear on the right side and is now waiting for us to be visualized. But now we also want to make sure that we are saving our project.
For watching the video till the end. Please leave your thoughts below so we can discuss more about the topic. If you'd like to suggest a video that could help the community, feel free to message me on X or Instagram. We also share short videos on Instagram, so make sure to follow us there. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and might even create a video based on your suggestion. Thanks again for being part of our community. See you in the next video.